Welcome to the first of our How We Document panel discussions. We're absolutely floored by the response we've had so far and are really excited to chat through some of the issues that came up in the report. And when we ran the report, we had a relatively innocuous question in there, which was how happy are you with your design system documentation? And what became really interesting was diving into those answers to see what it was that was making teams happy with their design system and their documentation. And there was some, pretty obvious stuff in there, like the more coverage you have in your documentation, the happier you might be, to slightly less obvious things like, the effect of formal governance versus informal governance, or even having version control or localization on your documentation for your design system. So as a result, we thought that we would kick off the first of our How We Document panel discussions around this happiness topic to see what we can get and where we can get to with understanding what makes our design system teams happy. So today I am joined by Dan Mal and Michelle Chin for the second time because we're on a technical re-record. But so thank you very much for your time for the second time. And who knows, I reckon the second time's going to be better this time. Yeah, better second time around. I'll get you two to introduce yourself properly for those who are watching at home. But first off, I get to introduce myself because I'm talking. I'm Luke Murphy. My pronouns are he, they. And I am the design advocate lead at zeroheight, who are, of course, the design system documentation platform and the folks behind the How We Document report. I'm also the host of Design Ops Island Discs podcast, which Dan has been a guest on before. Thank you very much. I'm also the co-chair of Design Ops Assembly London, Design Club London, and co-organizer of the WDC conference out in Bristol in the UK. Dan, do you want to give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Mall. I am a husband. My wife and I are celebrating our 14th anniversary next week, so I'm very excited for that.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I'm a dad. I'm a girl dad. I have two daughters, a 10-year-old named Sita and an 8-year-old named Charlie. I run an agency called Super Friendly. I'm the founder, and we help teams with design systems. We work with in-house teams, helping them set up a design system practice internally, and just really get going on that and getting some momentum there. So we work with lots of different teams of different sizes. I've learned a ton of different ways to build, maintain, sustain design systems and how they go wrong. So always happy to talk lots of design system things.
Perfect. And Michelle, would you like to give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm Michelle Chin, and I am a design advocate at Zero Height. This is my second week. Super excited to be here. Prior to that, I was at Citrix, an enterprise software application company, where I was a product designer, design manager, design ops manager, and most recently managed the holistic design system across our product portfolio. So around 30 different products in different form factors, led by a federated team, which I helped manage and create the governance system for.
Brilliant. So, format for today, I'm going to kick things off with a few questions from the Zero High end of things. And then about halfway through, we'll switch it up and we'll go through some of the questions that the lovely live audience gave us in the live panel discussion that we did. So we'll go through some of those and then we'll wrap that up. It should be around about an hour, but we'll see how it goes. So without further ado, let's kick things off. And a nice, easy question to start off with. What do you think is the most important thing when it comes to making a happy design system team? Dan, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll start in a succinct way if possible. I think when people get the chance to work on the things that they want to, and see them have value for other people, I think that generally leads to happy teams.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Nice and, geez, very succinct. Michelle, how about you? What do you reckon makes a happy design systems team?
Yeah, I think very much what Dan said, but I think also from a more like pragmatic side, having a team charter that everyone can contribute to building and rally behind.
Yeah.
So they feel some sense of ownership and accountability for the work that they're doing.
Yep, that makes sense. And I suppose, I mean, both of you have had, so Michelle, you've had quite a lot of experience in house on like a design system team in different, or federated design system team in different kind of ways. Dan, you've worked with loads of different design systems teams. Um, have you seen any like markers that you think are common causes of design system teams being unhappy? Because I'm sure that there are some consistent features of unhappy design system teams.
I can start if
Yeah,
that's all right,
please.
Michelle.
Yeah.
When I see a lot of teams get frustrated by the fact that their design system isn't used, by anybody else. And a lot of that is honestly self-imposed. A lot of teams that we work with are on their third try, if not more, of a design system. And the term that we have for it at Super Friendly is design system graveyards. Every organization we work with has a graveyard of design systems, right? It's like, oh yeah, we tried that back in 2016, and yeah, it just didn't take. And so a lot of it is because I think teams, when they approach it like a library, like we're going to make a library and we're going to make it objectively better than all the other libraries out there, and then because of that people are going to use it. It's just a false premise, and then they get frustrated that doesn't pan out to be true. So I think a lot of that is just, for design systems specifically, like non-adopted design systems are a big point of frustration.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's still, adoption is still one of those things that I think a lot of design system teams, they feel like it's like a holy grail that they should be sort of aiming for, which really surprises me because I mean, design system is a product, right? Can you imagine if our product teams were going, if only people would adopt our product, it would just feel slightly crazy. And so yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, Michelle, have you seen any? Have you had any of those experiences in Citrix where you've had an unhappy team and you've sort of seen the markers of what is making them unhappy?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, just especially when you're trying to create a design system for a holistic company that has very disparate products and trying to create a very unified presence. It can be really hard because it can take a long time for things to be seen through or decisions to be made. It can't just, oh, we can, let's just make this button this way and ship it and put it in and it'll be fine. We have to think about, okay, what does that look like at scale? So kind of solving that problem of, can this work at scale? But then, okay, if we implemented it here, how are we going to roll out the implementation elsewhere? Can we time that right? And it just becomes there's a lot of other hurdles that you have to think about. So even though your team is very clear on the decision, the implementation, it's almost kind of like that adoption part too, where it's not getting used as quickly, can be a source of frustration.
Yeah, yeah. Have either of you seen I suppose when senior leadership isn't brought in as well, I feel like that's a pretty common one. That it's almost like you can have a happy design system team getting along, and then all of a sudden they realize that they don't have that buy-in from the top, and they're kind of like set adrift in the organization. I don't know. Have you? Are there any like early markers that you think sort of teams should be watching out for that almost like red flags to sort of watch out ahead? To make sure that they don't become that unhappy design system team.
I mean, for me, it's less related to happiness specifically than it is more to like motivation. But like one of the things I come back to is this book Drive by Dan Pink, where he talks about like what drives people, and the three things that he says is like AMP, this is what gets people amped: autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Yeah.
And like design system, for design systems, mastery is built in a lot. By default, engineers and designers get to make system things, and like there's some mastery involved in that. And a lot of times there's some autonomy. But if your senior leadership isn't bought in, the purpose part just goes away, right? Because you're like, I don't even know why we're doing this, because people don't care why we're doing it. Like, so if the purpose part goes away and all you have is mastery and autonomy, it's not the full formula. And so I think in general, people want to know that what they're doing matters. Yeah. And if senior leadership has either implied or even directly said, like, we don't care about you doing that, that's kind of a buzzkill. It's kind of a buzzkill to know, like, the thing that's really important to you, people higher up than you in the organization don't care about it. That stinks.
Yeah, which is, I think, also like this is where a lot of people don't realize that communication is such a key part of like what a design systems professional needs to be doing when they're sort of part of a team, and that kind of like design system advocacy within the company. Because it's interesting. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. We've been talking a lot around whether design systems should be invisible because like the concept of a good design system should be invisible because of how seamless it is and like just how integrated and perfect it is. But that kind of almost goes against that feeling of actually I don't know, it's almost like maybe that's an ideal but it's maybe not a reality. And I'm just curious, like, how do you feel about that concept of the invisible design system, Dan?
Can I punt, Michelle? Can you go first? I'm
Yeah,
not sure what my answer is, but yeah, do you
yeah,
mind?
I think that's a very interesting question because like I spend so much time and having the designers on the design system team like advocate for the
Mhm.
design system. So we're like in critique sessions saying, hey, don't forget this is a component. You can use that component. Or hey, this is a pattern that you can use because people forget. So I think just the by virtue of it being invisible, unless it's like I can't imagine someone being pre-programmed, especially people who are creative, being
Mhm.
pre-programmed to like just automatically just use the design system and not think they're going to think outside the box. I mean, I think that's kind of
Yeah.
why we are, designers by nature, is that we're going to come up with different things, be inspired, and then all of a sudden not follow the design system. So I feel like it could quickly unravel.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, I suppose, yeah, it's I'm not going to go down that invisibility route then. But I suppose one of the important things to focus on as well when we're talking about like design system teams and sort of being effective and being happy in the work that they do is, we need to also look at the people that are in the team, and whether you have the right people. So I wanted to chat a little bit around, what do you think is like a good design systems person? What makes a good design systems person? Um, Dan, I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, especially like I suppose we can cover off generic traits in any of the roles. I mean, whether it be designer or engineer or PM.
Um, I've been I'm gonna go off on a weird tangent here. I've been reading a lot about beavers lately. Um, I'm writing a book about design systems, so I have to go down like an academic, like I'm going to research everything. And so I promise this, I have a point here. I've been reading a lot about beavers and how they build their habitats and things like that. And beavers build things for themselves and their families and their whole, I don't know what a group of beavers is called, but group of beavers. They build dams and they chop down trees and wood and like all this stuff. And the interesting thing about beavers is that the stuff that they do for themselves also has a benefit to other animals in the ecosystem, right? So
Yeah.
like the trees that they chop down, other animals live in those. It has a positive effect on the ecosystem that's not just directly related to what they're doing it for, but a lot of indirect kind of byproduct. And I was reading some text from this person who called beavers ecosystem engineers. And I thought that was just a great term for like a design system person. It's like, yeah, this is a person on a design system team, people who are well suited for it, like building platforms, right? They like building things, sure, for themselves, but also that have an added positive benefit for everybody else too. So it's like it's about somebody who's not just designing or engineering or building for a specific maybe product or feature.
Yeah.
They might be doing that too, but also in a way that goes like, oh, now other people can use this, right? And so that idea of platform building, there are some designers and some engineers who just don't care about that, which I think is fine. Like not everybody has to care about that. And then there are some people who care about that more than they care about, something specific for a feature or for a product or something like that. And I think that's why this virtuous cycle of like design system and product at an organization, both sides are necessary and useful, is that we need people who can build things for other people to build on. And then we also need people to just do the designing and building of the thing too. So I love the idea of ecosystem engineers, and I think that there are some traits of people who have like kind of a proclivity to that I think makes for a good design system team member.
I think that sums it up quite well. Michelle, did you have anything that sort of you added in your experience?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because I like that ecosystem engineer. And in my experience, I've built teams that kind of all share different facets of that ecosystem. So some people are more strategic thinking, some people are more detailed thinking, some people like interaction, some people like, visual design or have a knack for different aspects of vetting components. So trying to build out a balanced team of that. But I think the biggest thing is like making sure everyone is collaborative, because there's a lot of decision making, joint decision making, a lot of brainstorming that you have to do together to arrive, and some of it's really hard. And so you want to make sure that people are willing to collaborate, and if they're not, that can just make things a lot harder than it needs to be.
Yeah. I think the only thing that like I know I definitely add in there is like a good trait to have, goes back to what I was talking about before around that proclivity towards being an advocate for the work that you're doing, and probably like a passion for design systems. It sounds silly, but it's like not having that passion for design systems makes things a lot harder, especially when you're in that role of like trying to advocate out for design systems within your company. Um, I'm interested as well because obviously you said, Michelle, that Citrix were federated, right? So you didn't have a centralized design systems team. Um, and I was just curious, like, how hard was that to sort of like hire people who do think more in that way, when they're not only working on the design system? And like, how do you manage that from that approach of like the federated approach, and making sure that you've got the right balance of people working on it?
Yeah, I think for context, we had our team was about 65, our product design org was about 65 people big. So we had
Okay.
a pool to choose from.
Yeah.
So when we did pull together a federated team, I made sure that we kind of covered all the product areas. So we had good coverage when it came to vetting components, and then good coverage when it came to all those different aspects of vetting a component. So
Mm.
accessibility to visual design, motion, that type of stuff. But I think in general, it is hard because they're only part-time on the design system. So their products took precedence, and so a lot of the work didn't get done. So while we were
Yeah.
good at making decisions, the execution aspect was really hard. So for this year, I was trying to push for production designers, so more of a centralized, so like a hybrid approach. So you'd have centralized people being able to create the components and keep up with the pace of the design team and engineers' needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So okay, so offer the people for a little bit. um, and I'm interested in so one of the things that came out of the report that I was really interested in, because I was surprised at, to be honest, is around measurement. I mean, we just did a big measurement panel few months ago, because it seemed like one of those hot topics that everybody is talking about and cares about. 9% of respondents to the survey, and what, it's not like we had a small number of people responding to the survey. 9% track the metrics on the design system, which blew my mind, because I thought that it'd definitely be higher than that. I mean, Dan, how important do you think it is to be aware of the success of your design system and the documentation in like making a happy, effective team?
Yeah, I mean, measurement is important, right? The mantra is like you measure what matters, and
Yeah.
if you're not measuring it, then it's invisible, and it's hard to be able to say that it matters. So I get that, but I have a lot of grace for teams that are not measuring things. I would imagine, and what I've seen, the teams that I've worked with, it's just a pragmatic thing. There's just too much stuff to do, especially when you're establishing a new team and a new design system and a new product, and like it's hard, it's really difficult. And so um, I think that is a very common reason that teams don't measure what they're doing, is they just simply haven't gotten around to it. It's not because
Yeah.
they don't want to. It's not because they think it's stupid. I haven't met many design system folks that are like, we will never measure anything because we think it's like, a cardinal sin or something. It's just that like, we got to make stuff and we got to get it adopted and we got to evangelize and we got to hire and we got like, there's a lot of stuff to do. And a lot of times the measurement falls to the bottom of the pile because it's not really crucial. Like it's not a prerequisite to having a design system, even though strategically it's crucial, but it's not one of the, like the nuts and bolts thing. It's different than like, well, we don't have a button component, like, well, that seems like you would need one of those things to even have a design system that people use. So it just doesn't make it to the initial list of things that a design system team would do.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. I mean, do you think that there's a point where it becomes essential? Do you think that there is a point, basically, where do you see the value in measuring actually comes in?
Let me say what a blocker is to it first. One big reason that I think teams don't measure is that the tooling doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's one of the things that I think all of us see a lot is like, okay, you want to measure your design system. How do you do it? You want to measure adoption? What tool do you use? Google Analytics? No. Like Hotjar? No. Like there's not good tooling to measure design system analytics. Figma design system analytics is different, right? It's a different kind of way of measuring because it's about their tool. So it's a useful measurement, but it's still not so like a lot of teams have to custom build their analytics and metrics platforms. The Evergreen team built it custom and, and as soon as they did, everybody's like, oh, can you open source it? Because nobody has something like it. And they're like, I mean, we could try, but it just might not work for you, So there's all these blockers in the way. So measurement is important, yes, but like how do you implement the measurements? Like you have to have a lot of times a person in charge of that. You have to have the tooling, in place, which is another effort. So I think that's a big thing. So I think measurement is really important. I think that kind ways to measure and even hand wavy measurements are fine. And I think a lot of teams put a lot of pressure on themselves to go like, if we can't measure it to the, to this decimal point, it's not even worth measuring. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, it's nice to know that you're in the ballpark of 50 to 75% of something, even though that's a wide range, than just not know at all how you're doing on something. So I think that if teams can start to measure one or two things, I'll share a quick story about that with a team that I'm working with right now. We implemented the first component with a feature team, and it was when we only had one component in the design system. That's how we started. V1 was one component, and we worked with them to implement it, and we did a usability test with them. The way that we did it was we sent them our reference site made in zeroheight plug. We sent them our reference site. We sent them the library, the GitHub, and then we said like, can we just watch you like silently, and then you can talk out loud about what you do, how you implement it. So they were kind enough to let us do that, and then they implemented it within a couple of minutes, and they were like, yeah, it's done. Like that was cool. And so we asked them, like, how much time do you think that saved? And they were like, I mean, it did save us time. I'm like, well, how much? They're like, I don't know. Like, it was just faster to do it that way. And so we kind of pushed a little bit. Like, do you think it saved like a couple of hours or a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of years? And they were like, I mean, probably like a week. And we're like, great. And that was the first point of measurement for us. It's not detailed measurement, but that's some measurement because now we know it's not years and it's not hours. It's a week. So great. Like, and then maybe later on in the life cycle of this design system, maybe we track that on a quantitative basis with tooling or anything like that. But the first place to start, hey, we save teams kind of a week. That's a great metric, a great baseline for us to have.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think you're right. Like most of the teams that I've talked to that have really good like measurement in place, they've built it all themselves, which is just not particularly sustainable for a lot of places, especially as you said, when you've got to build the bloody system first. That does quite often take priority. And I'm sure that the product team at zeroheight will kill me for saying this, but I know that analytics measurement is one of the things that we're interested in soon. So, but it's interesting that you mentioned those qualitative measures as well. And I'm wondering, like, Michelle, like how important do you see like qualitative measures when it comes to sort of measuring success of your design system? Do you think that they're worthwhile? Do you think they're important?
Yeah, I mean, I
Leading
think the
question.
way for me in running the design system team and just making sure the product design org was it's just the qualitative is huge. I need to know that they're happy, right? Like
Yeah.
I need to know they're satisfied customers. They're able to use the design system well, effectively. They're not breaking components, and getting that feedback is really important, especially with the governance system and creating something that can be really really messy, or making decisions that are kind of messy. Um, Understanding people's happiness through that, the qualitative means a lot to me. I think when I have to go to execs to say, hey, I need more headcount, that's when I have to bring in the quantitative. That's what they care about. They're like, how are we saving money? Where, how can we optimize how much money we spend? How little can we get away with spending? So I think in that aspect, I have to kind of put on my like accountant hat and try to figure that and pull numbers from there. But I'm also not going to set the team up of like, we need to figure out these numbers and do things by the numbers to make it work. I'm more of like, let's just all get everyone on board with the design system and make it a thing, and we can worry about the metrics later. But
Yeah.
which I don't know, maybe that's kind of made things more difficult on my end. But I think it's, launching a design system is hard. It's a lot of work. So making sure the people are happy and getting that qualitative aspect is huge.
And I mean, when it comes down to it, right? A design system it's a product, but it's a product for the internal teams. As you were saying before, Dan, it's like, and making sure that those people are happy is. I do think that is a worthwhile measure to actually measure success for whether it's working, because it's the same way that you measure if your users are happy, right? If you had a outward facing product, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
comes to like retention too, right? Like
yeah,
if you don't have a good design system and you you can find a job elsewhere that has a great design system,
oh
I
yeah,
mean,
definitely, yeah.
like it's
Staff
why,
retention, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If your team that are working on it aren't happy, then you're probably not going to have a successful design system because they will leave. Yeah. Great. So I think it's probably time to switch the focus over to some of the lovely audience questions that we got from the live audience. So first up, we have somebody who's asking, as an overwhelmed design system person, does anybody have some good tips on how to grow a design system team? Dan?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start that. Almost all of the design system teams I work with are overwhelmed design system teams, like no matter what the size is, right? So like first thing, you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
When it's one person who's the design system team, they're overwhelmed. When it's 10 people, they're overwhelmed. When it's 20 people, they're overwhelmed, right? So it's like there's always a lot of stuff to do. So I think one of the tools and the techniques to managing that is just scaling your work with the scale that you're working at. Like when we work with a lot of teams at Super Friendly who are starting a design system or trying to restart a design system, and where we start is we go like, even at an organization that has dozens or hundreds of digital products, we always say like, let's start with 3. Like the first goal of the design system is to support 3 products, and that's it, or 3 features, and that's it. Eventually, over time, it has to scale to managing many more than that. But like out of the gate, trying to support dozens and dozens of apps is really difficult. So we start with 3. So as an overwhelmed person, what can you do? Like take the right size of work, spend the first 90 days going like, we're going to support 3 products. And the other thing that's related to that is the design system doesn't have to support every single component in that product or in that feature. It can be one component, and all the other components in that feature are custom built by the team that's working on that feature. That's totally fine too. I think a lot of folks think that design systems have to be like all or nothing, like, oh, like every single component on this page has to be powered by the design system. I have never met a team that has been able to do that, other than maybe startups that have built a design system as their first thing that then they use to build their first product. Like at that size, maybe. But at any given scale, that's very, very hard to maintain. So I try to encourage teams to be kind to themselves. Don't bite off too much, especially at first. And then as you are able to scale your product, then you scale the team. Then maybe you hire one more person, or you bring on a part-time person who eventually becomes a full-time person after a couple of months. And then the team scales as the product coverage scales.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing. And it sounds like it's what you're saying, right? It's managing expectations as well outwardly, making sure that you're communicating those expectations outwardly so people know what to expect and don't expect everything to be done. Well, I'm interested too, because when it comes to like, do you have any, or Michelle, I suppose, do you have any like techniques and tips and tricks for helping manage those expectations externally so that folks don't expect everything to be done in an instant? Because it seems to be the expectation, especially, we've got a design systems team, now. Like, surely that means that component's not going to take more than half a day.
Yeah. I think the big thing is like I kind of bring people along for the ride. So I'll update them and kind of show the roadmap of like, hey, this is the approach that we're going to take. So because I think the other thing is everyone when they hear, oh, we have a design system team, and they think maybe design system for them is just a sketch kit. Like, oh, that's easy, but it's so much more than that. And
Yeah.
so kind of sharing with them like how much more and what exactly is in a design system and who's involved and how decisions are made. I think that kind of helps them have that empathy and understanding of like, oh, this isn't just to snap my fingers and make this button blue. There's a lot that goes into it. And so level setting expectations of like, hey, I know we want the design system to cover all 100 products, but maybe we're just going to start with 3 for this quarter, see how it goes. And people are very amicable to that. I think that's the thing is like they have different expectations. So if you can kind of clarify and provide some transparency, it helps a lot more than you think it would. So it's definitely worth the time worth taking the time to do that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were saying before, right? It's communicating, communicating outwards, and being that advocate for the design system, pulling the curtain back a little bit and showing people the inner workings. Um, in terms of, do you think that there is a sweet spot when it comes to your design, like when you're dealing with a team, dealing with the design system, whether that be federated or centralized? Um, do you think that there's a sweet spot in terms of like team size and what that team makeup should be? Who should be involved? What kind of roles should be involved? What is the ideal design systems team? Dan?
So I'll give a short answer and then a medium length answer. The short answer is like 6 to 8 people I found to be the sweet spot. And a lot of that is because more than that, communication gets tough. Not necessarily like the design system work, but just like keeping everybody aligned is tougher as you get outside of that. And I know a lot of teams, I forget exactly what it is, but it's something like the 2 pizza rule or something like that, where if you can feed a team with, I don't know if it's 1 pizza or 2 pizza. I eat a lot of pizza. So
2 pizzas.
2 pizzas. Okay. So yeah, if you can feed the team with 2 pizzas, that's probably a good size for a team. And I think that comes back to communication. What's that?
I was just going to say, isn't that a 2-person team?
Well, if I'm on the team, it's a 1-person team. Eating a lot of pizza. And if it's a thin crust pizza, we're talking like 3 or 4 pizzas now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it depends what kind of we could go down the rabbit hole of pizza, and then it breaks this whole conversation. The medium length answer is it? I think it depends when you're talking about in the life cycle of your design system. So when you're first starting, there's no coincidence that lots of design teams start with 2 people, an engineer and a designer, because that's the nuts and bolts stuff of the product that you're making. And then over time, you might need more engineers or designers, because the capacity of work just overwhelms the 2 that are on the team. You then might need like a management structure or a hierarchy. You might bring a design manager or a tech director or something like that onto the team to oversee the design and engineering work. You might need some more management by the way of like project management. I've worked with a lot of design system teams that then have a design system product owner. And then even more mature design system teams, like there are also, sometimes there are specific UX needs or content needs or writing needs, like all of those are important roles early on. And then later on, mature design system teams treat it like a full-on startup product where it's like, we need business analytics on this team. We need UX on this team. We need QA sometimes on this team. So, I mean, it is eventually a mature design system teams can become fully featured cross-disciplinary teams. I think one thing that's important is that you keep it parallel to your other cross-functional teams at the organization. So like nothing sends the signal that a design system is not a product is like all your other products, have this cross-disciplinary team, and then your design system team has like 1 part-time designer. It's like, no, that's a side project. That's not a product at your organization. So I think the team structure signals how serious the organization is about a design system.
That's I think you just hit the nail on the head there. It's interesting actually because it was something that came up. We asked people in the report and how big their design system team was, and you didn't. I mean, out of all the people who responded, you didn't really get any design system teams that were bigger than 10 people. Not many at all. I think the ones that did, because we asked people to break it down, it was engineering resource that usually went up as the scale went up, which kind of makes sense. But it was really interesting. I expected there to be some mammoth design system teams, but apparently not. Which I suppose does track because it's the same way that like you wouldn't have a I don't know 70-person product squad, would you? For like an individual part
Gosh,
of your
I
product.
hope not. Jeez, I hope not.
Oh, it'd be horrible. It'd be horrible. Cool. So, also, so you mentioned there around like starting the design system team with maybe like two or three people. At what point do you reckon it's worth getting a dedicated design system team? I'm wondering, like Michelle, especially because you come from the world of having that federated team. I mean, looking back at that, at what point do you think it does make sense to maybe spin up a sort of like dedicated resource to the design system?
Yeah, I think throughout the evolution of all the different design
Mm.
systems that we've had, we've experimented. No one was on full time, but they were like
Yeah.
50% of the time. And people, other people, because of resourcing constraints, were really skeptical about giving someone up for 50%. I mean, that's a lot if you have a lot of work for them to do. So I thought, by forming this other team, which was unwieldy, but we all loved each other, so it was fine. It was like 15 people big, but for decisions and communications, it got really unwieldy. But
Mm.
even with that many people, like them giving 10 to 15% of their time was still not enough. And so that was kind of our experiment for last year. And so for this year, I was pushing, we need actually dedicated people who can focus, who won't context switch, who can get the stuff done, because it's just so hard without having someone dedicated on it. So I think as you're getting bigger, the minute you're starting to kind of expand, probably beyond 3 to 4 people, I would start pushing for it or planting that seed, saying, "Hey, I think we're going to need headcount for next year,"
Yeah.
just because it's much harder to ask for headcount after you have this big team of like, well, you have 15 people, and then I have to show like all the Jira tickets of like, okay, this is actually what got done. So it's definitely harder and then we're like much more mature in our system now, and we are clamoring for headcount, right? So the sooner the better, because it's going to take some convincing anyway to get that headcount. So hopefully the timing is right by the time your leadership is like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dan, did you have anything to add or?
I'm a big believer in tying design system goals and metrics to business goals and metrics, like the larger organizations. And I think that's a business decision of like, how quickly do we want to grow our team? How much do we want to invest in headcount and hiring and things like that? And, design systems are new enough that not every stakeholder knows about them or knows the intricacies of them. So I tend to speak in analogies, when I'm talking to stakeholders. And the one that they seem to understand more is like, all right, well, we're making a startup right now. We could bootstrap it, or we could, if we're trying to go for scale fast, we have to raise VC money, right? Like, so which one of those things do we want to do? How do we want to do it? We could bootstrap it, and we could have designers and engineers giving, like Michelle said, 10% of their time here, 15% of their time here, in this week. And this is how fast we're going to go with that. In a year, we'll have, 2 components that teams could use, and we'll have maybe half of a, contribution structure mapped out, and it'll take us 6 years to get to this point. Or we could invest upfront and we could go this fast or this far, if we invest this much and have this big of a team. The business decision is up to you. Like neither of those are a wrong answer. It's just how fast do you want to go and how far do you want to go with it? And like, though that usually puts it in enough business context that it's like, yeah, so right now we can't afford to go far, so we're going to bootstrap it. Well, great.
Yeah.
Now we can set expectations on what a bootstrap team can do in the next 6 months or in the next year.
And I think that's the important thing, right? It's setting those expectations,
Totally.
which we've talked about, I think, multiple times so far. But it's setting those expectations because that's the thing. It's like you can't achieve the same thing that you can with an engineer and a designer that you could with a fully resourced team, multidisciplinary team.
Yep.
So one of the things that did come up in the report was around governance systems and contribution models, and unsurprisingly, the people who are happier with their design system were the ones that had formalized governance and contribution models that were understood and used. So I'm curious, especially on the okay. So let's do governance first. Because I don't think it's a sexy thing that anybody wants to touch on. And again, one of the interesting things that came out of the report was the fact that we did ask whether it was a formal governance system or an informal governance when it came to your design system. How would you go about putting in governance? Are you a fan of formal, complicated governance, or do you think informal is fine? Dan, I'm curious.
I think it could come from either direction. I think when the team doesn't know what to do, something has to establish what to do. And I love what Michelle brought up at the beginning of this conversation, which is like teams need a charter, right?
Yeah.
Because they need a framing mechanism for making decisions. Otherwise, if everything is equally important, it becomes very difficult to make decisions about how do we do this, and how do we keep doing this, which is what a design system is supposed to be. It's like it's supposed to be a practice of doing things over and over again, right? So if people don't know what that way is, someone has to say it. Someone, like, it has to be decided somehow. And in that case, formal governance that's written down, it is helpful. The other side of that, I think, is, and I try to opt for this. I think there's more benefits to this, but it's more difficult, which is that I try to get teams to follow the instincts that they have and go like, well, how could we govern this? Like, how could we do it in a way that is natural to this team? And once the team finds the groove of that, then we document it afterwards. Then we go, this is the way that we want to do it, it seems like. So now we make that the process. So in either way, it can be formal or informal, but does it start with somebody writing it down first and then you practice it? Or does it start with you practice a bunch of things and then you write down what works? It really doesn't matter which way you go about it, but like the answer is somewhere in the middle. I think both of those are equivalently good entry points into it.
And do you find, I'm repeating a question that I definitely asked the other day, but do you find that the bigger the team, the more mature the design system, the more need for formalized ways of doing things?
Michelle, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think it depends. When I started a smaller governance team, we kind of started with a very loose structure to see how it worked, and that worked well. So when it came to a bigger team with more products, we had to scale the governance process a little bit more. So it was based off of, so people didn't break out in hives because it was based off of something that had worked before for other designers. And it's kind of like you kind of have to be able to read the room of like, what does the team need? Does the team need more direction or less direction? And you kind of follow that lead. So for this, because there was some people who had been on the previous design system team knew how the flow went, but others were new. So I kind of laid out the structure and was like, we're going to try this, but we'll see how this goes. And, we can take out steps, we can tweak steps. So I did have like a heftier system in place, just because of like, we had different stakeholders and timing and different groups. And it was a lot more orchestration involved. So the decision-making process was pretty much the same, and which we came up with in the charter. We all just decided on consensus. Which was good. So we knew when it came time to like make a decision, we all knew how the decision making would go, which was helpful. But yeah, the rest of it was like more process oriented of getting like the various approvals from various design directors of their products and stuff. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's so, because it's interesting. So I think contribution, I feel like governance is one of those things that people don't want to deal with, so they don't. And so it's usually like, I do think that it's one of those things where it's like, I think you said the other day, Dan, around the, it's like when you first start out, it's like going to the gym. It's like you need a strict plan, having a strict plan and having something written down that is guided and, relatively strict, getting you into practice is the right way to go. And then as you settle into it and you get more mature in what you're doing, then you can kind of like, um, freeform it a little bit and figure out what works for you and kind of go with that. And I really like that idea. But it's interesting. I do think that having that formalized way of doing it, especially at the beginning, does make it easier to get into those patterns.
I think one of the outcomes that most organizations want from a design system is that it becomes part of the culture.
Yeah.
Right? And culture meaning like this is just the way we do stuff, right? Like that, this is what's normal here. And a design system when it first starts is a foreign body. That's why it gets rejected sometimes, is because it's so abnormal. It's not the way that people do things. And so now you're trying to introduce a new way that people should do things. And that's the eventual goal of it, is like, we want it to be part of our culture. So how do you do that when a thing is abnormal? Sometimes you just have to build the habit. Sometimes you just got to go, well, we got to do this. Here's step 1 through 7. Like, no, you got to go do step 5 again. And sometimes you need a trainer, a personal trainer that will just make you do that step because it's not natural to you. But then the more you do it, the more natural it becomes, hopefully. And the more, and the less you need that formal structure. The formal structure is still there. It's just internalized. It's not externalized anymore. So I think that's the challenge with design systems, is it is an external thing that you want eventually to become internalized. What does that process actually look like? And governance is one way to model how that would go in an organization.
Yeah. Do you think the same holds true with like having like actively building out a contribution model as well? Or do you think, and I'm definitely leading you with this question, do you think that a build it and they will come system is the better way to do things?
Oh gosh, almost never. Like, yeah, that was very much a leading question. Thank you, Luke. Build it and they will come never works for design systems. Never. Because, well, I won't even get into the because. It's like, the hardest thing about design systems is that what we just talked about. It's internalizing it, which is another way of saying adoption, right? Like, get it, like, make it part of the way you do things. And that's the challenge, right? That's why it's difficult, is that thing is difficult to do. So how you go about doing that, if it can be, the more natural it can be, the longer it'll stick around. And that's the thing that I tend to work on with teams, is how do we make it natural? The way that we try to do contribution is by doing things that are easy for the organization. Like, what is the organization usually already good at? It's product design. They're making products, right? So keep doing product design. And how do we suggest making a design system is super friendly? Is you extract the things out of the products that you make. You don't make a bunch of things in a library and then hope that people will use them. Like, that's the foreign body thing again. So what do you do instead? You make products and then you extract things from that into a design system. And what is that? That's automatic contribution right there. Like, that extraction process, it's a cheat code to contribution. And it's not like you had to follow an 11-step process to get that to happen. I think a lot of people see it as like, well, there's a design system team that makes design system components, and then there are product teams, and the product teams then need to contribute to the design system. And I'm like, wait, what? Why would product teams contribute to a design system? That's not their job. The design system team should contribute to the design system, right? That's their job. And they should be pulling that stuff out of the way that the organization does products, which is just let them do regular old product design, and then the design system team's job would be, one version of it is to extract and abstract things so that other folks can use it. And that's where a contribution model becomes very natural. You don't even have to write it down sometimes. Whereas if it's unnatural, then you have to write it down, because otherwise people aren't going to intuitively know how to do it.
I think that's almost like a good measure for whether it is successful as well. It's when you look at it and go, does this feel intuitive, or is this something that I'm going to have to remember? I'm going to have written and sitting beside my monitor so that I remember how to do it.
And this is where we're at a disadvantage with how young design systems are relatively, is like, it would be awesome to look back and say, yes, we know that this design system was successful because it stuck around in an organization for the last 20 years. But I mean, the field hasn't been around long enough, for us to be able to measure that. I mean, we can barely measure, adoption or other things that we were talking about earlier. So, all to say, all of those things I believe are coming. You know, we just haven't been around long enough to see them through yet.
We're still young. We're still babies.
Oh yeah, we're all very young, very very young.
Especially here, we're all spring chickens.
Incredibly.
Okay, I think we're about time to wrap it up. So I've got one more question for you both. So if there was one thing that happens that is common in design system teams or in design system practices or whatever that you could change that would make you a happier design system practitioner, what would that be? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So my wish of wishes would just be that everyone understood design. Like I didn't have to champion design systems or really sell it. Like people just got the need for it and was like, okay, let me just open up my wallet and start funding it right away. That would because there's so much decisions that I have to make anyway, or that teams have to make anyway, that like if we can just get over that hurdle, that's like huge. So
yeah, definitely. Dan, how about you?
I like Michelle's answer. +1 on that. I guess the other one that I can think of is I see a lot of design system teams that stress themselves out. Like they think they have to conquer the world, you know, and like, oh, we're starting a design system right now and we have to have 100% coverage and 100% of our products. And it's like, who can do that? So I sort of wish that design teams give themselves permission to, or design system teams give themselves permission to do less. You know, do less. Like it's like design systems help us be more efficient and consistent and all that stuff. So what are we using that stuff for? To just build more things? It seems like not always a good answer. Like, yeah, sometimes we should use that extra time to build more things and innovate more. But other times I think we should just use it to give more vacation days out so that people can like take more breaks. So yeah, I wish that design systems gave people more permission to do less with the extra time that they get.
That is an amazing way to frame it and an amazing way to wrap things up as well. So thank you so much for joining me here today. If folks, I mean, I'm sure that they already know where to find you, but if folks do want to find you online, well, Michelle first, if they want to find you on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle?
It's @soysaucechin.
Brilliant. Is there anywhere else that you hang out online?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram too @DCSkaGirl. So maybe I'll see you on various platforms.
Great. I'll see you at a Ska show. And Dan, if people want to find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, I'm at Dan Mall on Twitter. I also have danmall.com, which I write at infrequently, and also superfriendly.com, where we got a bunch of design system resources.
Brilliant. So we will be posting this one up on YouTube. Well, that's probably where you're watching this at the moment. And we'll be hosting another one of these panels in the coming weeks if you are watching this shortly after it has been posted up. So please keep an eye out on the zeroheight social media feeds. And if you're a subscriber, then keep an eye on your inboxes because you'll get an exclusive link. You can come and also join us over at the zeroheight Slack community called Zeros. If you want to know more about that, you can go and have a look on our Twitter feed, some details on how you can join there. Or you can just get in touch with me on Twitter and hound me. I'm @LurkMoofy on Twitter, or you can @us at zeroheight. I think that's about it. So I think that we can probably wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to do this again. And I'm hoping that we can do it another time in the future, but maybe around a different topic next time.
That'd be great.
Is that good? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, all right.
Take care.